This is a true story about the P Kurasu, the flying head without a body. These monsters are still very well known in Thailand and Laos. People today say that it's just a hoax and that there's nothing like that in America. This story actually happened in America, in a city that I don't know, but people around that area were known to die unexpectedly. So the police decided to do an investigation to see what was wrong. One night, a police officer was patrolling that area where the people were dying unexpectedly. He was looking around when he saw something glowing and floating around that area. So he followed it around, and as he got closer to it, he noticed that it was a floating head with a glowing heart or internal organs and no body. The cop got really scared and took off, running away from there. Right there at that moment, there was an old Laotian guy that lived in that neighborhood. He also saw it on that same night. That Laotian man knew immediately from the stories that were told to him growing up that it was a P Kurasu. He never once thought that these monsters existed in America and that they only existed in Laos and Thailand. However, this one made it to the States as well. The next morning, the Laotian guy called some monk or shaman that knows how to get rid of these monsters to come and capture it. They waited until nighttime because that's when this monster, the P Kurasu, comes out to feed. When the sun goes down, this monster would come to feed on people, in which it would eat the internal organs inside out. So the monk decided to go outside and chase it. As they were chasing the horrifying monster, they chanted their spells and managed to capture it. They said that it was a Cambodian lady doing all those things that made people unexpectedly die around that neighborhood. From there on, there weren't any more unexpected deaths going on in that area. Here's a little bit of info on the P Kurasu. This is a hostile and much feared ghost that usually appears by day as a normal-looking woman or occasionally a man. The only way to tell a P Kurasu by day is to look into their eyes. They have no corneas. And additionally, these monsters will avoid your gaze. Be careful about mistaking shy people for spirits though. At night, things take a turn for the worse and the P Kurasu sheds its human form, or most of it anyway. They only appear as the disembodied head and dangling entrails of the host. Where a human heart would be, there is a flashing light. They have voracious appetites and disturbing eating habits, consuming the internal organs of their prey. These monsters, however, will transfer between hosts by saliva, so be very choosy about who you get friendly with in Thailand or Laos. Here's another terrifying spirit from Laos and Thailand. They call this monster the Peep Pup. This is also another demon-like spirit that is known to be very scary and terrifying. The same thing with the P Kurasu. People still think in this day and age that these things don't happen and exist in America, but they still do. This is a story that I heard from another user on a different forum. There are Peep Pup everywhere, including the US. I witnessed one possessing somebody during my visit to the US several years ago. It was very terrifying. The paramedics came and they didn't even know what to do. They did their routine, but they couldn't stop that lady from going crazy. They did everything that they could on her, but nothing worked. Someone in the family called a relative because they were so scared and didn't want to lose their mom. This man came right away and he knew immediately what was going on. So they asked that man to go into the ambulance with them, in case that it happens again. I remember the man asking the spirit why it was there and why it was possessing the body of the lady. The paramedics took her to the hospital to get tested, and all tests ran good. Usually, the Peep Pup like to possess sick people or people who are feeling sick, especially babies. That's why when babies cry at night, you want to say gata or let the elders know to gata. Some people raise these spirits and they command them. When they do so, these Peep Pup spirits are usually passed down from generation to generation because someone's great-great-grandparents promised to take care of it in return for favors. However, if the current generations don't take care of it, then the Peep Pup would kill them. If they don't raise it right or treat it right, it will go into other people. The only way for the Peep Pup to go away from a possessed body is you either need a monk or a person that knows how to chant Buddhist sutras. Not only so, but there are other people who know how to take care of these spirits and handle them. There are some ceremonies where these people would put a big rock in someone's bathtub. I'm not exactly entirely sure what this does, but all I know is that it sort of counters or is able to handle these dangerous spirits. If you see these big rocks in someone's bathtub, don't touch it because it could lead to disasters. It is also not a good idea to talk about these Peep Pup very often because we could attract them to us. This would happen to me maybe a few times, but I would just usually brush it off. It probably started when we moved into our new home. I swear, I used to never really experience much supernatural things until we moved into this house. They're not off the charts like some people, but I've had some minor experiences while living in this home. Anyways, before my dad passed away almost a decade ago, he used to smoke. He would smoke in the house on his pipe. Sometimes, while I'm laying in bed getting ready to sleep, out of nowhere, thoughts of my dad would enter my mind. When they entered my mind, I would look at my mom. You see, my mom always talked about how my dad is next to her, or how she dreams of him and whatever. I'd look at my mom, turn back to sleep, and I'd smell smoke coming from my window. My bed is positioned right next to the window. It's like somebody is smoking next to the window and it comes into my room. This even happened the other night in the living room. I was just laying there watching movies with my nephew and the family. Out of nowhere, thoughts of my dad appears, and seconds later, I could smell the smoke. I asked my nephew to see if they could smell it, and they looked at me and said, "No, you're going crazy." Here's a small little thing that happened yesterday. My mom was sitting in her room. I was in there using my laptop. Out of nowhere, she screams for me. I told her that I was right here using the laptop. She then responds, "Then who's the one sitting next to me?" I couldn't really sleep the rest of the night. I remember when I was still living in Wisconsin. I was around 5 or 6 years old, and our backyard was very big. It had like trees on the border of it. One night, my uncles came over and we decided to play the 1 o'clock to 12 o'clock game. It's a hide-and-seek kind of game, and when we played it, it was around maybe 9 or 10 o'clock. In Wisconsin, it gets pretty dark around here, so one of my uncles was the seeker while everybody hid. After he was done counting and everyone hid behind the trees and all, he went to look for us. As he was searching around, he suddenly thought that he had found me because the person he found had long hair and was small like me. So he went to the person and was like, "Chang, I found you." I was in the tree next over and I was thinking, huh? So I revealed myself from hiding and said, "Hey, I'm over here." He looked up to me and oh my god, that's when he busted out running to the back door yelling, "Banzongo, kiolo!" And oh crap, we all came out from hiding and shot for the door. It was hella scary. When we all got inside, my parents and grandparents were yelling at us about screaming, so we had to settle down. My uncle then told us that he thought the girl was me, but because I had come out from hiding and I told him where I was, it turned out that it was a banzong. We were all scared, but we were kids, so we shrugged it off. But boy did we learn a lesson. No more hide and seek for us that night. The apartment above us was always for rent. We'll always have new renters every year. Well, the first one I can recall were 2 young single ladies. They weren't always home and I figured that they were out with their boyfriends or something, but one night, one of the ladies came knocking on our door saying that she had just gotten home and somebody had thrown the paper towels all over their bathroom. They wanted to know if we saw anybody go up, and of course we didn't because they would have to walk past our door first. In the second incident, we had new renters. This time it was a couple. They complained to us that all the new clocks that they bought would mysteriously go off during the night and during the day. They would then go and turn it off, but the buttons were not even switched on. After that, they moved out. In the third incident, we were drying our clothes in the joint laundry room for the apartments. When I got home, I felt somebody walk right by me. When I got to the door, I saw somebody run around the other way. I had initially thought that it was my friend, that she was always trying to scare me like usual, and I declared that I was leaving and turned off the light thinking that she'll come back running. But when I got back into the apartment, my friend was watching TV on the couch. I didn't say anything as I didn't want to scare her as well. In the fourth incident, I was home alone with my boyfriend at the time and his 3-year-old child. We were watching TV when all of a sudden we heard footsteps going back and forth in the vacant apartment above us. He rushed out to see if there were any lights on in the apartment in case somebody was trying to break in. He came back inside confused because there were no lights on, and he waited to see who would come out, but nobody did. Here's the fifth incident. My boyfriend's relatives decided that they were going to rent out the place, even though he told them of the weird things that he had witnessed and heard while staying at the place below it. The rent was pretty cheap. It was $200 less than mine for an extra bedroom as well. One night, his cousin, having just moved in and tired, slept on the airbed on the living room floor while his family were at their old place packing and cleaning it up. What he stated was that as soon as he fell asleep, he heard somebody with heavy shoes come up the stairs and stop at his door. He listened to it if they were going to knock, but what he saw next scared the freaking life out of him. He glanced at the door and saw a black shadow go right through it. The cousin watched in shock as it came towards him and down the hall until he was finally able to yell out and run out of that apartment. He dashed right out and knocked on our door. Needless to say, they forfeited their deposit money. Not only this, but my boyfriend's 3-year-old child never had any problem sleeping in my place while my boyfriend went to work. I'm sure that it was just the apartment upstairs that was haunted. However, once in a blue moon, when I dream about these apartments, that apartment upstairs could never lock, or I was never able to open it. I wonder what may have happened that have transpired there a long time ago. A few years after my parents arrived here in the States, they bought their first house. Within a few days of moving in, things were not up to par in that house. There's so much to share, as everyone who visited or stayed with us witnessed something in that house and still talk about it till this day. The children of the original owners sold that house with all of the furnishings, so my parents and grandparents were up to the task of cleaning everything out. My mom said that one night, while she and my grandma were home alone with me as an infant, they were having dinner. Suddenly, the diaper box started knocking like somebody was throwing rocks into it. My grandma quickly got up to flip the empty box to see if there was a mice in there, and it was empty. She then put the box on the other side of the room. As soon as she sat down, the box started knocking again. My grandma got up slowly and grabbed the box, and the knocking stopped. She then put it in the corner and stood there to see what was causing the knocking. Within a few seconds, the box started shaking, and she jerked back and grabbed the box and threw it outside. One night, my mom left a candy bar on the dining room table after grocery shopping. The next morning when she got up, the candy was gone. My dad hadn't seen it, and she knows that she didn't move it, and as confused as she was about it, she wasn't scared until the next day when she went to throw away some stuff and the half-eaten candy was in the garbage can. My aunts used to come and stay with my mom and us while my dad was working, and one night, while watching TV, the house started shaking. It sounded like somebody was knocking on all the windows around the house. Another aunt had also come over another night, and as she was sleeping, she felt somebody pull her blanket down. She pulled it up and rose up from bed when she saw the blanket go down again. She quickly left the room and went straight to my parents' room. She didn't stop to look and see what it was. One night, while my dad was out, my mom had us in the bedroom, and she said that I was laughing and playing with my younger siblings when I turned around towards the corner. I started crying and pointing into the corner, telling her that I saw a ghost. She said I covered my face and refused to look up, and no matter how much she tried to calm me down, I would not budge or stop crying. She then started spitting and yelling at the ghost to stop scaring me, and then she said at the same time that she was also terrified to her bones as well. We had an uncle who came to visit us one time. He woke up early to make some coffee, and as he was sipping on his coffee, he saw a half-human/half-horse-like creature run straight into the garage. He froze and walked to the back of the kitchen and looked again. The garage door was completely shut and there was no signs of this creature. When my parents got up, he told them what he saw and they seemed real concerned about it. My parents were then advised to pour some white stuff around the exterior of the house, and if there was something there, or if there was actually a creature, they would know. They did exactly as told, and the next morning when they went to check, there was a track all around the house with footprints not like a dog or a cat, but a sheep or goat circling the house a few times, as if the tracks were overlapping each other. We eventually sold the house and we didn't encounter anything scary after that. My friend and her family used to live in this house in Minneapolis. At the time, she had some cousins living with them. They had a bunch of kids that liked to go into her room to use her computer. The kids know that when she's sleeping, they can't bother her. Well, one night, as she was laying in her bed getting ready to go to sleep, her bedroom door opens. One of her little kid cousins peeked in and saw that she was sleeping, so he closed the door. Just as she was drifting off to sleep, she quickly opened her eyes and saw some people in her room. The way they were dressed were probably around the 1800s European style. Anyways, they were standing maybe 10 or so feet away from her. As she was looking at them, she noticed a little boy standing with them. The moment that she saw him, he saw her. At first, he was at the foot of her bed, when all of a sudden, he was standing right in her face, looking at her. They looked at each other for maybe a split second, and she blinked. When she opened her eyes, she saw that that family were gone. About a couple of years ago, one of my distant uncles got really sick. At the time, he was a big believer in the old traditional ways. After many attempts to see what was wrong with him, he decided to convert to Christianity. He told my cousins that if one day he dies, he wants his funeral to be the Christian way. Well, a couple of weeks ago, he passed away. The elders and the cousins got together to discuss what to do. My distant uncle only has 3 sons. 2 of them are married and 1 is single. Well, the firstborn son was recently out of jail, so they turned everything to the second son. Since those cousins don't really go to church, they turned to their uncle and asked what they should do. That uncle said that to just do it the old way, since he believed in the old way and they should do it that way. They didn't really try to appeal to my distant uncle and his wishes of having a Christian funeral. Well, the second son lives in a house where there's this light upstairs that doesn't turn off at all. Right after they agreed to do it the old way, the light suddenly turned off and every light upstairs. Ever since that night, the distant uncle would visit him every night in his dreams. I'm not sure how he appears, but I was told that the second son would not go upstairs at all. That cousin then began to wear some sort of necklace that protected him from spirits. I had a friend in high school who lived in a haunted house. She even says her dead grandma still haunts the house. She says she can feel her grandma the most near or in the attic. Her grandma is a good spirit, but she isn't the only one there. There were about 3 or 4 different spirits that live in that house. One night, she was going to use the bathroom. As soon as she opened the door, she heard a loud scream come from inside that very bathroom. She got surprised and scared and she closed the door immediately. But after hearing nothing else, she opened it again and didn't find anybody inside of it. She also believes that the spirit of a tall, dark man haunts the place and likes to play tricks like moving car keys and books. My mom and aunties, along with a few other Hmong women, rented out some unoccupied land where we used to live and do gardening. Well, recently, everyone's been growing corn to make money instead of just harvesting veggies for their family, my mom included. Once the corn started growing, it could get really creepy, especially at night when you're the last one to leave. One night, one of my aunties were going home late, and by the time she started packing her things and getting them into the car, it was already dark outside. As she unloaded the last of her monk shovels into her car, she hears somebody calling her name in the field of corn. She thought somebody else was probably still out there, so she replied back. Just when the last word left her lips, she regretted it because the hairs on her arms and her head were on ends. She felt a cold breeze fly by, and she saw that someone or something was rustling through the cornfield in a rush to get where she was at. She scrambled into her car without any hesitation and started her car. As she drove away, she noticed that although the rustling stopped in the area where she was just at, there was nobody there. She thought that with that much commotion in the field, there must have been a body to move the corn like that. But nope, nobody. After that incident, word traveled and nobody stays there late. Everyone leaves when the sun begins to set. I never really believed in ghosts and spirits until the following event happened. One of my uncles was dating a girl from Laos a few years ago and made a big promise to her, including marrying her. Then, when he returned to the States, he married a girl here instead. The girl in Laos took her own life shortly afterwards, and a few months later, my uncle became very sick. We contacted a very gifted shaman, and he said that it was the girl haunting him, and he would have to perform a ceremony to get rid of her. The ceremony took place at around 5 in the morning, right before sunrise. My uncle had to stand by the door to wait for the spirit of the dead girl. As soon as the shaman finished his chant, he announced that the spirit was present. The shaman quickly threw 3 small knives into the door, and blood trickled down from where they entered the door. The trail of blood led to outside before disappearing. I was about 5 feet away from the door when this happened, and everybody in the room was spooked, even the shaman himself. People tell of ghost stories and how they hear things or see things briefly out the corner of their eyes, but to see something as concrete as a bleeding door, that was unreal. Here's another story similar to the one previously. I had an uncle in a similar situation. He was going to marry this girl from Laos, and he got all the paperwork done and everything, just waiting for the approval. The girl he was supposed to marry ended her own life because she had a boyfriend in Laos, and I guess that boyfriend in Laos told her that she'll be wanting to come to the US, so why didn't she give it up to him? She did, and because of that, she got pregnant. Her parents yelled at her, like how she could be so stupid knowing that she was going to have an easy life in the US, but she screwed up. She went to the guy that got her pregnant, and he didn't want her either, so she ate some poison and died. After a year or so, my uncle goes to Laos to get his wife, and when he gets there, her parents tell him that she ended herself because she got pregnant by some other guy. My uncle decided to marry some random girl that he went to see a couple of times. At this time, they weren't as strict on having people come to the US. After they came back to the US, this dead girlfriend followed them back. My uncle lives in a duplex, and my cousin's family lives in a duplex below them. She said that at night, around 2 or 3 a.m., she would hear somebody walking around their bedroom because her room is right under theirs, and this would go on for hours. She said that one day she couldn't stand it anymore and threw her shoes to hit the ceiling. That night, when she did that, something came and sat on her. She finally told my uncle what she hears every night, and my uncle had to change his name and he moved to sleep in a different room. They still live in that house, but he doesn't go by his old name anymore, and he just doesn't go into that room. A long time ago, I came back home from work, and at the time, my boyfriend was sort of living with me at my apartment, but he was also living with his parents. I came home and cooked and ate, and I was watching TV. It was about 6 p.m. and the sun didn't go down yet. All of a sudden, there was this crow sitting there by my window, and then it tries to come in. But there's this big glass between me and the crow, so I didn't see how it could have came in. It was so weird how this crow was trying to come inside when the window wasn't even there and it was just glass. This kind of creeped me out, so I closed the blind, and a few minutes later, the crow flies off. After a month or so, I had a dream about this black shadow following me around, and that I'm running out of my apartment to get to the stairs, and a neighbor downstairs is sitting on the steps, so this kind of made me not as scared and woke me up. Then, about a month later, I started feeling kind of suicidal and depressed, and that's when I swore if my cousin wasn't on the phone with me, I would have ended my life. It was so weird because I've never felt that way before. I was relieved to move out of that place. When I moved to my new place, I had a similar dream, but this time I was living in an old house where I grew up in Cali. I opened the blind and the black shadow disappeared and I woke up. A few weeks later, I started feeling depressed and suicidal again, and when I finally moved out of that place, I felt better. Here's a couple more stories that I have from my family and friends. One of my friends was dating a guy who worked in a funeral home. Whenever her boyfriend goes to the funeral and she goes with him, he won't say anything, but as soon as they leave, he'll say that he saw something from the corner of his eyes and didn't want to tell her. The funeral home that her boyfriend worked at, no matter how many times you lock some of the doors, they will still unlock themselves after a few hours or the next day. One day, her boyfriend went to the funeral home to do some stuff, and he checked on all the doors to make sure that they were locked. The one on the side, he swore that he locked it. She said that he told her that day that it was unlocked, and he said, "Hello?" and somebody answered back, "Hello" to him. He freaked out and left, and made her go back that day after she got off work to go and search to make sure no one was there trying to play a prank on her. He said that it was a male voice. She said that when she got there, she didn't find anything. She told me that a few days later, while they were sleeping, he told her that he saw this tall black shadow walk through their bedroom door and walk to his side of the bed. This thing, or whatever it was, then got on top of him. He said he tried yelling for her to wake up, but she couldn't hear him. When he finally broke free, he woke her up and he had saliva on his face because he was drooling from this thing sitting on him. The weekend came and he went out of state to visit his parents. She stayed home alone. That Saturday night, she slept on his side of the bed and told me that same thing got on top of her and she couldn't move. She said it felt like a dream, but she remembers waking up to her voice singing a Christian song. She sat up in bed and didn't see anything and went back to sleep. My friend is afraid of things, but when she's tired and she doesn't care. She said that a day after that happened to her, she called her boyfriend to see when he was coming home, and he told her that day before she called him, he talked to his mom about what happened to him. His mom had this shaman lady come and do the jingle bell thing for him, and she said that there's this tall American spirit that likes him a lot. This spirit followed him home from the funeral, and it was that voice that said hello to him, disguising its voice as a male voice. She said that the spirit was the one that got on top of him, but that he didn't need to worry because the shaman told the spirit to leave already. So she finally told him her story and how she slept on the side of the bed and what happened to her. I guess the ghost must have thought that she was him. Here's the last little story that I have to tell, and let me tell you, it was very creepy when I heard it the first time. I have a sister-in-law who my brother just married from Laos not too long ago. I also have 3 brothers that live together. My youngest brother and her husband worked early in the morning, and my older brother works at around 2 p.m., but he stays up really late and sleeps really late. She told my brother, her husband, that one day in the morning, because one of my other brothers worked early in the morning at 3 a.m., she woke up to say goodbye to him, and she said that as soon as she lay down, she saw this black shadow-like thing climb onto the bed, and she felt the weight of this being on the bed like a heavy person climbing onto your bed. It got on top of her and she couldn't move, and no matter how much she screamed, she couldn't break free. When she was able to, she woke up and turned on the light. Not only so, but my brother says that sometimes when she's lonely, her dead grandma would come and visit her. Because of this, she tries not to miss her family too much. She said that the last time this happened to her, it terrified her very much. One time, when my brother left to go to work, not even 10 minutes passed by, and she sees these 2 male spirits climb onto the bed, and she could feel them squeezing her heart. She said that there was this rotten stench in the room and she couldn't move, but somehow her hand must have hit her phone and her phone dialed my mom. My mom said that she kept yelling out for my sister-in-law, but nobody would answer. So my mom called my brother, the one that works the later shift in the day, to wake up my sister-in-law in case she couldn't move because of the ghost. She told my other brother that my sister-in-law called her, but she wasn't answering back on the phone. So my brother woke up and went and knocked on her door, and I guess that's when she was able to break free. All this happened so fast, and she said that she felt like they were on top of her for hours, but it was only really 2 or 4 minutes. So after this, my brother prayed with her and told her to sleep with the lights on and that he would keep his door open in case anything happened. She had to sleep with the lights on all the way until the morning sunrise. Now that she has 2 kids, nothing really happens, but she still gets spooked out here and there sometimes. I have a few stories that I want to share with you all. I had a cousin who passed away about 2 years ago. Anyways, we lived both in Alaska, and before she moved here, she lived in Detroit, Michigan. A little bit of information about her: when she lived in Detroit, her mom remarried to my uncle, and so she was originally a Chang. Anyways, when she lived in Detroit, she went on a school field trip with her junior class, and I don't know where this happened, but it must have been at a river. As the class walked along the river, she was the one left behind. As she noticed that she was left behind, she told me that by the time she turned back, she saw these 2 beautiful swans just randomly swimming in the river. She didn't think much of it, so she turned and walked on. As she did, she decided to turn around again, and suddenly there were these beautiful white water lilies. That was weird for her because water lilies aren't found in fast or moving waters such as rivers. Anyways, she went home after that, and that is when weird things started to happen. Her mom once told us that my cousin has her own room, and whenever my aunt went to go and clean it, around the entire room there would be lip marks. It was as if my cousin had put on bright red lipstick and kissed the walls, but my aunt thought it was even weirder because the lipsticks were also on the ceiling as well. After that same event kept on happening, my aunt and uncle never thought to do a shaman ceremony, so they moved up to Alaska. Everything was quite normal when they moved up here. Nothing much happened up here until my cousin told my aunt that she had a boyfriend. My aunt, of course, didn't believe in her because my cousin wasn't the outgoing type. So, ignoring her once more, my cousin just lived her life as normal. As years went on, my cousin graduated from high school and just stayed home most of the time. But one day, she came to my aunt and told my aunt that her boyfriend was going up to the sky to continue his education, and he told her that he would marry her after she graduates. My aunt thought that she was joking, so she brushed it off. Then my cousin decided to tell my mom about this as well. My mom knew immediately that something was up. She asked about the time span that she's been seeing this guy or boyfriend of hers. My cousin told her that it has been ever since her field trip in Detroit. Well, my mom also asked how she meets up to talk with him. My cousin told my mom that when the guy comes, it usually comes by visiting at the mirror or sometimes even the window. My mom asked her how he looked like, and she said that the guy comes in the form of the snake, but when he gets to her, he's really shiny and cute. Except she only thinks that he's cute because she says his face is as if his face has been blocked by unclear glass. My cousin said that this guy would tell her that she'll never see his face until the day that they are married. Now, my mom knows exactly what this means, so she told my aunt and uncle. My aunt and uncle are kind of stingy, and they want to save every cent that they can somehow, even if they were millionaires, so they never did a ceremony for her. 2 years goes by and my cousin gets a job at McDonald's. She worked there for 3 days and she suddenly went deaf, so she quit. This then made her really angry because being deaf and not hearing anything is frustrating. The only way that we can talk with each other was by writing. She was so frustrated she decided to state to everyone that she wanted to end her own life. I cried my eyes out for her. I felt bad that I am her cousin and I couldn't do anything to help her. Her stepdad then decided to take her to the mental hospital. She took many medication and prescriptions, and the doctors didn't know what made her deaf and they couldn't really help her much. She improved, so they let her go home in just 2 weeks. When she got home, she asked my auntie to go buy a pregnancy test for her. She was told by the doctor that she was now pregnant. My aunt got curious, so she had her other daughter call and ask the hospital doctor. My aunt told the doctor that my cousin wasn't pregnant. Despite these things, my aunt just shook it off and ignored it. Now, the day before my cousin passed away, she begged my aunt for a new jacket. My aunt said no, of course, so my cousin said, "Okay, well, when my boyfriend is done with school, he is going to come down and marry me." Then she went into her room, and my aunt just shrugged it off like usual. In the middle of that night, my cousin's half-little sister said she saw my cousin go to the kitchen and grab something, then went to the bedroom. That sister didn't think anything of it, so she went to sleep. Then, at around 5 a.m. in the morning, her real sister woke up to see my cousin's light on. As curious as she is, she went to go check up on her in her bedroom. Then, when her sister went inside to check up on my cousin was sat in a kneeling position with her legs and her body hunched over. The sister thought that she was just messing around because in the past my cousin would do things like this. So she went to grab my cousin's hand and told her to get up, but she noticed that her hands were extremely cold, almost to the point as if they were frozen. That's when the sister went into shock and screamed for my aunt. My aunt and uncle woke up to go and check and see what was happening. All they saw was her hunched over body with a dull knife. My aunt bursted into tears and they called the cops. Paramedics and cops came and questioned everybody. When the body was removed, on the floor was a very small patch of blood. She had used the knife to cut her throat and end her own life. Anyways, everyone assumed that she has been taken by the dragon and the spirit of whatever it was that disguised itself as her boyfriend. This was told to me by one of my friends last night. This happened when she was about 13 or 14 years old. She and some of her cousins were playing hide and seek this one night. She was tiny, so she was able to hide under a car. As she continued to lay there, she saw footsteps and shadows walking around the car. Suddenly, she felt somebody tugging her pants from under the car, but didn't say anything, and then it was gone. She waited and waited for someone to call her out, but nobody did. After a while, she finally got out from under the car. She went inside and saw that all the kids were still there. She asked them how come they weren't playing around anymore, and they replied that they stopped playing for a while and didn't want to fight her because she hid too well. After that, she's never played hide and seek ever again. There's a couple more from the same friend. She has this cousin that lives in a haunted house. Apparently, that family experienced some supernatural things inside that house as well, and so did my friend. It happened to her twice when she went to sleep over there. The first time she went to sleep over there, my friend and her cousin were sleeping in the den. Just as she was about to go to sleep, she heard the back door open and close. Thinking that it was her other cousin, she drifted off to sleep. However, as the night went on, the back door continued to open and close. She didn't tell anybody about it. The second time she slept over, her and her cousin slept downstairs. She slept next to the wall and her cousin slept next to her. It was early in the morning, right before 6 a.m. She was slowly waking up from her sleep when all of a sudden she heard and felt like somebody was caressing or rubbing against the wall coming towards her. Then she started hearing her name being whispered into her ear. She quickly turned to her left, covered her ears and tried very hard to go back to sleep. She stayed like that for a few minutes. Then she heard her younger cousin come down and told them that they had to go somewhere. In the year of 2010, during the squirrel season, like around October, I went hunting with my wife and we slept at the normal campsite where my relatives usually came at every year. Well, my wife and I went hunting and later on that night we slept in our tent and nothing weird happened, but we sleep very early due to daylight saving time. We slept at around 8 o'clock and it was very quiet. Then I had a very weird and strange dream, and by that I mean a very scary dream. The dream was me seeing the entire scenario from the top of our tent, or you could say looking down at our campsite from above. You know how dreams typically work. Well, in my dream it was very dark outside. The propane light was getting dimmer and dimmer. Our red tent was on the side of our usual walking path to the other campsites. The campsite was very small, probably the size of a gym, then it's forests and hills. Well, I saw what looked like these two little girls walking towards our right side of the tent and they were holding hands. They seemed to be wearing Hmong clothes and then they came around the corner toward the entrance of our tent. You know how the fabric of the tent is just polyester or synthetic, something like that? Well, these two girls turned into bunzongs and they reached their hands through the fabric and I could see the fabric pushing towards me. At the same time, I could see them from the outside. Meanwhile, all of this was happening, my body was frozen and I could not move. I yelled and yelled, but my wife couldn't hear me. I tried and tried, but I was stuck and frozen. I was helpless. Then I got mad and reached out for my .22. I tried to reach for it, but it was hard for me, so I got even more mad and started getting pissed off. I was finally able to grab the .22 and shoot them, and then I woke up from that nightmare. It was only 12 a.m. I didn't tell my wife, or else she would cry wolf. It was pretty scary. I shrugged it off and went hunting the next day. I told the OGs and the elders, and they asked me if I was scared. I told them nope, I wasn't scared at all. I was more afraid of thieves than I was of ghosts.